If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome into the Level Up Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me once again, I've got Josh. Josh, how are you doing today?
I am tired. I am just tired. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. This is some recording right after Super Bowl. I injured myself on Super Bowl foolishly with a microplane, so made for an unfortunate event. The party was fun. Sorry you couldn't make it, but
yeah, I'm sorry about that too. My wife was beat from her excursion, and then I ended up taking a nap when the game was playing. I've just been I've been really busy, and I'm trying to relax. And a lot of the media that I've been trying to relax with has been so bad. Just like it's been bad recently, man.
Been bad. How bad?
Bad, like bad storytelling, bad design, bad like plot progression. There's issues with ludonarrative dissonance with the characters and the music that's playing and the events that have just happened in the game. Like, and I kind of want to talk about it. And I think it may be a good idea for our listeners, for us, to talk about bad stories.
Yeah, these are probably the ones you should avoid.
Yeah, things that you can put into a story that you think, oh, that'd be great. And it's just, they're not. They're bad.
There are so many good ideas for stories, but really, if you don't understand why the bad ideas are bad, then you're going to have a hard time avoiding them, or you're going to want to dabble in them. And there's some that I would say are like egregiously bad, and there are others that I would say are like, these are just really, really hard stories to do, and that's what sort of makes them bad.
Yeah. But, I mean, you can have, like, great ideas and just bad execution also. And I think that's a great place to start, because we don't want to, like, if you got a good idea and you do the wrong things with it, you're just going to end up with what feels like a bad story that people don't like. And when I say, bad stories, the only bad story is a story that the audience, your players, aren't interested in. They aren't engaging in. That's a bad story.
Yes. So like there's a lot of things that can be bad via execution, but there's a lot of things that are just bad because they generally are uninteresting stories. They're interesting. And a lot of things that are bad stories in tabletop RPGs are not bad stories in other media.
Yeah, they either don't work right in tabletop RPGs. They put too much emphasis on one thing and not enough on the group. There's issues with it. In other media, there's other problems. But I think some universals can be applied. And I would like to start with the current string of Marvel movies. Have you seen any of the latest superhero movies, Aaron?
I have not. I've watched a couple of things from the MCU post Endgame, but I have not really consumed like any movies or anything out of the MCU after Endgame. And I know that they had a formula that was like very good, and they worked it really well through Endgame. And then, of course, because the nature of having to pay actors and stuff, you end up with highly overpaid actors. I think Endgame cost like $1 billion to produce.
Yeah, I mean, and then when you've got that much money on the line, you have to follow, the bean counters are always going to be like, well, we can't take any risks. We got to be as, by the books as possible. And the problem is that a story without risks is boring. It's just boring.
Yeah, I mean, they have so many things that are open, and I think the idea of how comic book movies have evolved, okay, this is a whole different tangent, so I'll make it short, has been a good thing, okay, in terms of like you get to see stories that you would never have seen adapted. It was always the origin story plus insert one other villain that shows up later, okay? But now you're getting more of like the comic booky feel to the movies themselves. The problem is that there's probably a fatigue around the movies, but then two, you have to change actors and actresses, and things change, and it's hard to maintain the same level of interest and to build things up through all that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that like I get they're using existing stories. They've got, the comics, and they're rehashing them and changing them up so that they've worked better on the movie screen. And they work better for modern audiences and with the characters they want. But there's a lot of emphasis on what comes next that was missed in the original products, in the original, first couple of series before phase 1 or phase 2, whatever you want to call it, with the Avengers. They were really trying to make, like, let's make the best movie we can because we just need to keep people coming in, right? And now you've got very much this let's keep the product rolling. And I think if you don't have stakes for a main character, and I mean you don't have stakes for the main character, they're going to survive this movie because they're slated for 3 more movies after this. And, you're going to introduce a couple of villains or side characters that come along the way, and there's no stakes to them either because they're already slated for their own movie later on. So what are you watching? It's like a Transformers cartoon, but not one of the good ones where they kill off all the Transformers.
Yeah, again, things change, and it's hard to maintain a level of interest in what you have there.
So basically, what I'm saying, for a bad story, you need to have some level of interest in what's going on. If you've already said that the characters are going to survive, there's no conflict. There's no, risk. And if you keep telling the same story, sure, you might switch out some set pieces, but it's the same story each time. That story is not as interesting. So those are bad story ideas. Those are movies. I put Snyderverse in here as well. The DC stuff. I just thought that was very much the same. Like, they spent so much time trying to build a franchise rather than just tell some good stories. And I think in terms of tabletop, that's very important too. Is like, don't try and make an epic adventure by forcing all these epic things in there. Try and tell a good story. It will become epic.
Yes, you will. Trying to build the epic and trying to lay groundworks for an epic when you don't have any fundamentally interesting stuff before that is a surefire way to just have a very dull game, and what is honestly just a bad game. So.
Yeah. And I think that works. Like, I've seen a lot of the similar stuff in video games. And I'm just going to skip this whole next section I wrote here, which is just me complaining about Square re-releasing Final Fantasy VII over and over and over. But that's just me being cranky.
Again, the rehashing of old stuff coming into existence is it's very challenging. It's not interesting in and of itself. Like, that's the problem with it. Because it's not interesting, why do it?
Well, one of the reasons I had written this section into my notes was it became me complaining about Final Fantasy VII. But I think the big thing was I'm very nostalgic for the, like, Super Nintendo, and even up to like Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy 12 at the latest. That gets sort of edgy on there. Those games, those I guess early games, were constrained by size. They were constrained by the media in which they were being presented to the audience. So they had to take big swings with character design. They had to do a lot of work on dialogue without giving a lot of dialogue. Right. Once you got into like 10 and 12, you start having the voice acting. And, there is something to be said for that. It's really great to have voice actors and to give emotions in those. But I think more the recent games, and not just Final Fantasy, I think a lot of recent games, you've got voice actors, you want to show emotion, let's just like record them forever. And it's not helpful. Old games, if you have an interesting NPC or an interesting character, it needs to be an interesting character. It needs to showcase why it's interesting or how it's important quickly and definitively for your players. Because if you end up with like a whole bunch of same characters because you're just like padding it out, you're going to end up with, I don't remember what that guy's name was. I don't care about him. I know you spent, a ton of work creating a backstory and a whole persona for a character, but we've got 30 of them. And why do I care about, this one? It's, if you want to tell a good story with characters, make them memorable, make them, unique, but don't have a billion of them because you're only one person and they're all going to end up the same.
Yes. No, I agree.
I mean, yeah, I think a lot of that complaining was because I just played Visions of Mana.
That's your most recent poo-poo.
Yeah, I'm trying to relax. I'm tired, I'm getting stuff done, and we're coming out of the holidays, and I'm just like, my kids got me this game, and I loved the gameplay loop. The actual playing of the game, the fighting and it's great. It's well done. Graphics are very pretty. It had sort of a cartoony vibe to the whole thing, which was nice. Fit a lot of that old like Secret of Mana style, but in a 3D world. It's great. But the dialogue was excessive. And like just they went on forever. It said the same thing over and over and over. Very annoying. And then there was a bit of that ludonarrative dissonance. A character is brutally murdered, and they're playing happy carnival music in the exact next scene, and all the characters that just like had to deal with the murder are like, well, I guess we're just gonna keep going on our trip. This sounds great. Like, totally brought me out. And that's like early in the game, and you're like, who designed this? I kept playing. I beat the game. It was fun to play. But like, I would skip cutscenes or like put my controller down and walk away.
Just not interested in the story. The
No.
gameplay was fine. The story was like meh.
And if you're making a game and you're like you're GMing a session where your players are completely toned out of your story, but are into the fights, into the way you've built encounters and the dungeons and whatever you've got, well, you should take a look at your story. What is wrong with it? Why aren't your players following the story? How about you? Any games recently or movies you've seen?
Yeah. You'd put this down. I was thinking about it here before we started the podcast, and The last one, my time is extremely limited right now, but the last one that I played that was like, I had heard so many good things about it, and I was just so disappointed with it, was like Final Fantasy 16. And
Yeah.
Final Fantasies have generally been a pretty safe bet. They're sort of like the Christopher Nolans of like, the gaming world, or
Yeah, but every now and then you get that Tenet, and you're like, I don't know if this is for me or not.
I still like Tenet.
It wasn't bad. It was just like, I don't know if this is for me. Maybe it is. I don't know.
They had built up enough goodwill with the franchise that I was like, okay, I'll get this. I'll play it. But I think the problem with it was it was very restrictive comparatively to a lot of other games. And so like is the narrative wasn't phenomenal or anything. It's like Game of Thrones and Final Fantasy. And it was I was like, it's like, how far, when I start questioning how far into the game I am, okay, and I need to start seeing how many more sections are left just to finish the game, that's when you know that you've run out of space. Yeah. And so like it was that uninteresting and that uninspiring that I was just like, I don't really want to do like, I don't want to dig into any of the side content. I don't want to, truly engage with the game. I just want to get to the end of the game. And I'm like, but if I just want to get to the end of the game, we're just saying it's just because I want to beat it. And so it was a big disappointment. I chose to put it down. I have not gone back to it since. But, that's, again, anything, whether it be tabletop RPGs or anything else, has to respect your time. And so, don't, like, a bad game or a bad story idea will ultimately not respect your time.
Yeah.
So,
well, I absolutely agree. I think we both played that game and stopped playing it about the same place. And when you say that, if you're writing a story, you have to respect your player's time in, getting to the point, in moving things along. I think one of the things that turned me off on Final Fantasy 16 was some of the giant kaiju fights. And not because they weren't like these epic fights. They were conceptually. They just had no stakes. And it just seemed to be, you're going to be fighting giant monsters for the next 20 minutes. Sit back and just keep tapping this button.
Yeah, if you've been listening to Josh and myself, and you're like, stakes, time, stories, like, these are all points that like we've driven home before. And so you could maybe understand why these are making for bad story.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think it comes down to, how do we avoid that? I mean, I know we've talked about how to avoid each one of these things in various other recordings that we've done. Please go back and listen to
I was just going to say, just go back and just listen to the last 200 plus episodes of this podcast.
All of them. Download all of them.
Download all of them. You don't have to start from number one, but you just jump around. Any of those topics, any of those ideas, it'll tell you exactly how to avoid them.
Mm-hmm. I've got a curated list of podcasts in order to use them. No, that's crazy.
If you want the TLDR, I guess this is it.
Well, like I said, one of the big things I had a problem with was those kaiju fights, because I don't think the stakes mattered. I don't think and they were just long. And what does that sound like to me? That sounds like railroading. That is, you're going to follow this path for this period of time, and you're going to like it. And I don't care what you're doing. You're just going to follow this thing. Don't railroad your players.
Yeah. You have to give the players some choices, And whether or not they are all illusions of choice, there better be choices. Okay?
Now, I know I say don't railroad your players. Do railroad your players a little bit, but only a little bit.
You have to get them to the end of your story, okay? So they're not all going to do it the way that you had originally anticipated.
And you have to get them to start the story.
And you have to get them to start the story. So you have to give them proper motivation, okay? Sometimes you have to give them a little push in the butt, okay? And sometimes you need to do that as they are choosing where to go next, okay? Yeah. So the proper motivation and a little push, okay? And then if your players are still like, what do I do? And then you go, okay, well, when you go here, this person is suddenly very knowledgeable about all the things you need to know to go to the next step. Okay? Players don't know that you had to do that. Okay? There is no shame in doing that. There's only shame in doing it if your players know you did it.
Yeah.
Okay? If the players don't know you did it, then it doesn't matter.
More power to you. You did the right thing.
You did that. You did it correctly. If the players don't know you did it, and if the players do it the way that you wanted them to do, then you crafted a great story, and the players are probably having a great time. But if the players don't, then there's more than one way to get to the answer. It's just there has to be. Otherwise, you're going to have a very frustrating game.
If you drag your players through encounters that don't matter, don't do that. If you're dragging them through social encounters that don't matter, don't do that. You know, like trim fat from your stories and let your players experience the world in the way that they want to, not just because you want a set piece to be there. You want to have a giant kaiju battle, so you're going to sit here and watch a giant kaiju battle. Give your players something fun and interesting to do that matters, because it makes sense in your story.
Yeah. No, I mean, we can go on to other things that how do you avoid this whole thing? We've said it before, and I'll say it again. We talked about improving your NPCs, whether that's your bad guy or just anything else in the world. Again, they are the thing that gives life to your story. So, make sure that they either are properly motivated, they're interesting, they're useful.
Yeah. Main NPC from Final Fantasy VI, the 3 in the States, was a psychotic clown who was driven mad and destroyed the world, right? The main bad guy in Final Fantasy 16. Go on. Do you know?
No, because I never got there.
No.
It was some ambiguous, shadowy figure thing that shows up about like halfway through the game.
And there's like a bunch of just like brown-haired white dudes running around, and you're like, okay, but which one's my character again? There's they're not unique characters. They're all just meh. And I think, making NPCs that are unique, trimming them down to the ones that are actually necessary for the story, and just, you don't need backgrounds for all the shopkeepers or all the guards. You don't need a cast of 1 million people. Just make the ones that are important to your story and make them interesting enough that your players know who they are. Yeah. And you're talking about the big bad guy. Yes, bad guys that show up halfway through the story and you don't know why they're there, and they're sort of like, what's going on? The big bad evil guy, or the whatever's driving your story, your villain, your antagonist, needs to have a motivation.
And it should line up with things that have either hindered the players or things that your players have picked up on throughout the story. Like, it shouldn't just be like, what? Okay, because there's nothing more disappointing than realizing about halfway through that you've been fighting you think you've been fighting this one group or faction or person, and you're doing that, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere comes this other group, faction, or person, and you're just like, huh?
Oh yeah. Oh, the one that I hate is the bad guy is hell bent on destroying the world or whatever, is ruining your bake sale, and wanders off to go do something else because the guy writing the story wanted to have a set piece. He wanted to have a specific scene. There is this whole thing. I'm going to spoil this because I don't care. In Visions of Mana, where they have this beautiful bridge, and the zone is literally just a bridge. It's got a big open area arena in the middle of it, and it connects two places. There's no enemies the first time you go to it. You're like, first time you see it, like, this is an arena where I'm going to fight something here. And the main bad guy of the game goes to that place just to fight you once, and then goes to the place he actually needs to be and fights you again. It was a complete waste of time. It was a big bad guy did something that did not match his motivations, specifically so that there was a scene in a place. It was an unnecessary event. And that's something you have to look out for. Don't try and shoehorn in ideas you think are cool if they don't fit the motivation of your character. Your players are going to notice, and it's going to feel like we're just doing a thing because you wanted me to.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. So let's actually talk about some stories or some ideas that you should just avoid because they're bad ideas.
Yeah. I was actually talking about some of this with my Tuesday game, and they said some very specific things, and I wrote them down and you should talk to your players too. Everybody should talk to their players and find out what games that they've played in the past or that are just like they know are wrong, but people keep telling them.
All right, you've already hit on two. Well, your first point is the same as my point. It's just slightly worded differently.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we're at the same piece here. So I said any story where you are not the protagonist, where your players are not the protagonist, is a bad story. There is no exception to that rule. Okay? You might think there is. You might think that you're a great GM and you can figure it out. There is not an exception to that rule. Okay? And the rule is also equally bad if you make just one of your players the main protagonist, the one who cannot go.
The fated hero, the chosen one. You should never do the chosen one and then pick a player. You shouldn't pick an NPC to be the chosen one either, but we'll get into that. If you've got just one player is the chosen one, the fated hero, they can't die. Because what happens when they die?
The game ends.
The game ends.
Okay?
If
the game revolves around them, the game ends with their untimely demise. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a terrible idea. And all the rest of the players, every other person at the table is now window dressing. They are there to throw their bodies in the way of any harm coming to the person you've decided is the most important person.
Now, I hear people out there saying, "Well, I've seen it on some live play games, that somebody does." Listen, it is wildly different. You can go back and listen to why live play games are different and why a podcast. It's a form of entertainment. It's a form of media. It is not actually how you should run your game.
No, and it's the fated hero is one of those story tropes that is exceptionally fun to listen to or to watch. I mean, that is Star Wars. That is Harry Potter. That is, a form of media that is the hero's journey. That's the whole point. Is this person rises up and defeats the big evil? But you're not doing that. You've got a group of people at the table. Okay, this is not Frodo's the only one that can throw the ring into the Mount Doom. This is everybody needs to band together, and we're going to find a way to get it into Mount Doom. Everybody plays a part. Everybody's part of that hero chain, right? Which is why if you're going to do any sort of the chosen one or the fated hero, it needs to be an open-ended prophecy that the whole party can fulfill as a group. And so now you've got the fated party.
And even that has its own problems, which is the fated party can die. But fate is a very, very difficult thing to do within your game. I think we talked about it once before, but it is extremely difficult to do because you could die.
Well, you're removing stakes. You're removing options if you follow through with it. If you give the players stakes and options, then it's not fate. Yeah. Anyway, if you make an NPC the fated hero, now congratulations, you've made a glorified escort quest, and everyone hates those.
That's precisely what I just said with the protagonist. Yeah. If you aren't the protagonist, you done screw it. You might as well not. This game will not launch. There is no start.
I have one caveat to that. And it's a caveat only in so much as there's an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from season 3 called The Zeppo. In the Xander character, who is not a wizard or a slayer or anything, he's just a dude who goes to high school, is friends with the rest of them, is the main character of the episode. But there is a whole apocalypse happening that all of his friends are dealing with, and he has to go do other things. Now, that is an interesting story because he is still the protagonist of his story. There is another story going on in the background where he is not involved in.
Well, that's why he's the protagonist. He's the protagonist in that event. Okay, so it has nothing to do with there being more powerful, more important people in the world who might be more integral in terms of defeating the demon. You might be one of 1,000 that could do it, but you are the one that the story revolves around.
And your character should follow that. Your character should have that opportunity. So that's the fated hero. That's the chosen one. Don't do that. You can play with it a little bit, but only tangentially, or make it so it's a group thing, or make it so that there's prophecies that need to be fulfilled in order to do a thing, and everybody got a chance. Don't make it one person. Don't take agency away from your players, and don't it's bad. Now I know we've talked about the Marvel movies. We've talked about, I just brought up Buffy. We've talked about Final Fantasy a bunch. Another story that you shouldn't do is, and I'm guilty of this to an extent, is don't rehash existing media.
Yes.
Caveat with no changes. If you make Die Hard, but it's a wizard's tower, and first of all, that's more interesting, because you've got wizards and you've got spells and all sorts of fun stuff. And Nakatomi Plaza is now Nakatomi the Great's wizard tower. That can be fun. But if you do an exact telling of Die Hard, but now your main character is Jim McPlane instead of John McClane, What are you doing?
Yeah. I've done a 1-to-1 video game adaptation, and I've tried to do something like that before. This never works. So it's just like the reason why it doesn't work is you're like this doesn't make any sense. Video games like no, the reason why it doesn't work is because they are a unique piece of media in which that you are consuming a novel like story. So in order for them to work, your players must execute the story with an extra set of like rules that you might not be forthcoming with at the start of the story. And if you were forthcoming with at the start of the story, your players might be like, I don't want to play that game.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like your players might pick up on the rules of the story. Like, I've seen Die Hard before. I know how to do a Die Hard. And then they go around doing a Die Hard and like, well, there's all the difficulties gone. There's all the interest. There's all the like, I know that this guy's the bad guy. He's the one that is doing the bad guy stuff in this scene. So here's how I'm going to defeat the bad guy because I know how to do that. It's a Die Hard. It's so exhausting. Like, what I suggest with a lot of media, if you're going to use media as your story points, use them as story points, not as the plot of your game. Right?
Yes.
So you drop your characters into a world where the same situation, that they're in a similar situation, but they get to do their own thing. They get to make it their own. They encounter things that may seem familiar, but with a twist, with a mix of stuff. And that can be fun.
Your next one's interesting because I didn't think about this, and I hesitate to actually say that it's a bad story. It's generally a bad thing to do.
Yes.
Okay. Like this is like when I started this, the thought of the episode, I was like, I got a bunch of bad ideas. I'm like, I'm pretty sure these are bad ideas. You should never do them. And I was like, but there's a bunch of these things that are just like, you probably just shouldn't do that. It's not. It makes for an inherently challenging story or difficult story. So the reason why I think this next one could be bad, and so it's self-inserting yourself as the GM into the story. Okay, and well, I don't think it's the most egregious thing because you can still have a good game with it. Mm-hmm. It can become a bad story if you are the driver of the story again, or you are the protagonist. So like you have all the answers, and so the players don't have them anymore, or you are, of course, the protagonist of your own story, which would be just you might as well just stop.
Yeah. Yeah. You just want to write a novel. Just write the novel. Don't make other people sit through your novel. If it's good enough, they'll do it on their own, in their own time, at their own house, under a blanket with a nice cup of hot cocoa. That sounds really good, actually. Anyway, stop making yourself the bad guy. If you are putting yourself in as the bad guy, I think this is a bad thing, especially for people that don't see where they've made mistakes, and your players do. Because if you have put yourself in as the bad guy and have made a fatal error in your plan that your players then exploit, people tend to get attached to themselves more than just a random character they've made.
Yes.
And that's a bad thing. That's going to add to bad times.
Your players didn't just exploit that NPC you made. They exploited you.
They showed how stupid you are. Not that your NPC's bad. You can play off a dumb NPC. Yeah, he's dumb. I didn't screw that up. But like, yeah.
I would never.
Self-inserting yourself as like the good guy that saves the party or shows up at the last minute or is like, the hero of the realm that's stupid. Let your player you're there making a story for your players to enjoy and to showcase how they are. all of the characters are you already. You don't need to put yourself in as a hero. I think
Again,
that's
in
just
your next one here, I'm hesitant to say that this is always going to be a bad story. I could see, like, again, partway, like, yes, I agree that it could become a bad story, but it's probably not the worst thing. You probably just shouldn't do it because it's difficult to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is, you said telling the same story you told last time, which is, if the story is generally similar, okay, meaning that, like, same beats, same type of overarching theme, it's annoying, but it's not the worst thing.
Yeah.
Okay. If you are literally just retelling the same story, then it's bad.
I was thinking a lot of the about this as there's some TV shows, and I'm trying to remember one. Like they are extremely formulaic, uh, and you can watch any of them from
Like
the
House
entirety.
and Bones and
Oh
like
yeah, those are great ones where it's always going to be the same story beats throughout the
Law
thing.
and Order.
I absolutely love House and Bones for go falling to sleep. My wife needs the TV on because she's got tinnitus, and I can't watch anything that's actually interesting because it'll keep me awake. So those shows are wonderful. We can put them on and just like within 10 seconds, I know it's going to end, so I can go to sleep and I haven't missed anything. And your players are going to end up the same way if you're telling the same story all the time. Is I know where this is going to end, so I'm just going to coast through. It's less if you tell a good story, like there's a reason why Bones and House and NCIS and some of the other shows, like they've been around for ages. They lasted tons of seasons and everybody loved them because they're well written, because they're easy to get into, because you can drop them at any point. Those are great stories if you've got them refined and cleaned up and built as drop-ins, because you can watch one of those shows at any time and they're nice. But if that's the only story you ever tell, I'm going to switch over to a different channel.
Yeah, get some new ideas, as you said.
Yes. I specifically called out Kyle, not because I know a GM named Kyle. That's just my brother's name, and I just want to give him a hard time.
I'll let you get into your next point here.
I had mentioned this earlier with the Visions of Mana, and also earlier with some of the stories. Anything with ludonarrative dissonance. It's when the actions and the dialogue and the characters don't match up. The tone doesn't match. They're bad story. Like if you are trying to make a grim, dark story and it's full of happy fun time clowns and well, I mean not clowns. Clowns are terrifying. Happy fun time stuff. Or like, uh it's more of the make sure that your setting and your characters and the motivations and the mood all matches. If there is a disconnect, if a major character has just been murdered and now we're gonna have a party and we're gonna go to the fair and we're all gonna get cotton candy, it makes the story, it pulls people out of the story. It makes it hard for them to accept what's happened in a story. And the reverse also, if you've got like a happy fun time crew that's just murdering everybody, it's a good time, but it's not a compelling story. Maybe it's try and keep your mood and your tone to match the story that you're looking for, because that break is difficult, man.
Yes. I mean, like, I would again. I it generally does come off as a bad story. I don't think that it's not the most egregious thing that you can do, but it will generally come off as a bad story because it will probably break the immersion.
Yeah.
Of the players.
And if you are trying to get your players, I said this at the beginning, I'm going to say it again. The only bad story is a story your players are not enjoying or aren't engaged in. So if your players are having a good time, you're fine. But
it's just a thing to try to avoid if they're having a good time.
Avoid these things because this can really take a person out like, I was having a good time, and now I'm like, why the hell is this going on? This doesn't make any sense. This doesn't fit with what we were just doing. Right?
Yep.
Like the world. Oh, that's a great one. It's the world is ending sort of scenario. You know, you're rushing to save the world, but we've got a couple of minutes to do a couple of side quests, and I thought I might hit the casino and play some slots. Because
what?
Yeah, like that is a sort of disconnect that takes you out of the like, well, there's urgency. The world is ending. There's a giant meteor that came from hell that's covered in monsters, hell bent on eating all of us. But I got time to go, you know.
I got like 10 minutes to go hit the slot machine.
That's the Mass Effect 3 DLC where just before the apocalypse happens, they go and they have a dance party. And you're like, what? But, you know, it's a thing. So, that can be difficult. And it can pull people out of the game. And ultimately, what I'm looking for is to tell you is make sure your players are like invested in your story and continue to be invested, and don't go out and be like, that didn't make any damn sense, and now I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, this next one here, I guess it's sort of similar to one of the ones I had written down. It is still a bit similar to Get Some New Ideas, Kyle, which are plot twists for the sake of plot twists. So, like, if you don't have a lot of great ideas, you might just throw plot twists in. Also, running a game like a long-term game that you keep throwing plot twists into is fatiguing. And generally speaking, like, if you are going to do something in a long-term game, it better have more broad appeal to your players. So, like, you can experiment in a one-shot, like plot twists your way out of a box. Like, that'd be a fun one-shot, actually, where like almost every turn is a plot twist.
Constant plot twists. We should definitely write that down.
Okay,
that sounds fantastic.
But as it pertains to like an extended game, it's fatiguing to the players, and it's just like it's disengaging. It's the same thing as the ludonarrative dissonance that you talked about, which is you keep taking your players out of it. It's like, well, I'm getting no traction on any direction that we're going.
Well, I think the other part is that for a plot twist to have any sort of impact, you have to have some confidence in what you already know about the situation. And if the only tool that you've got in your bag is plot twists, your players are going to sit there and be like, well, I don't trust any of the NPCs you sent at me because one of them's the bad guy. And that really ruins the point of the plot twist, first of all. Second of all, it means that your players aren't engaging with your NPCs in the way that it's intended to. And now they're not, I don't know, they're not progressing the story properly, or they're not, you have made a situation where your story is overly antagonistic against your players. And that's not fun.
We're going to get to that one as we go later in this this thing here. So you said a story that has too much is happening at the same time. You had mentioned Dogman earlier.
Yeah, I didn't go see it. My kids went and saw it with my grandma, my grandma, their grandma, my mom, and all the reviews and even what I heard from my mom was it's too much. There's too much going on. It's so much all the time. It's like being in Vegas in the slot machines, where just like lights are flashing constantly.
A lot of these all kind of fit into the too much is happening. You're too much of the same story. Ludonarrative dissonance, plot twist. Too much is happening. Too many things are changing. It's disengaging from the actual story itself.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that you can't tell a fast-paced game, okay, where a lot is happening and a lot of things are being thrown at the players. There's actually a time and a place for that to make your players feel stressed, like inducing stress, inducing emotion out of your players. That's a good thing. But if it's just like, even in the most stressful environments, things ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
You need a moment to breathe when things are being thrown all over the place. So, like, be careful with that. Again, that's why it's generally a bad story idea. If it's just like 100 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, you probably never land any of the points necessarily.
Because your players don't have time to ingest or digest, I guess. You've thrown so many things at them, they don't remember where it started. You need that time to breathe. You need that ebb and flow. You need that space to process. And yeah, okay, well, we did like 70 things in the 2 hours of the game this week, and we're going to do another 2 hours next week, and we're doing 70 things there. No, because they haven't caught any of the things you got from that game. It is just a mess. I don't like the next one I put in here, and I was
this makes a lot of sense, though. This is like
this goes back to your point where if any situation where your players are not in control of the game, I wrote any story that can resolve itself without player intervention, with the one exception of Raiders of the Lost Ark, because he really tried. And he was there and like moving the story along, but if he wasn't there, it would have ended the exact same way. So I'm not sure. Like, that is one of the situations where if your players' actions don't affect the outcome of the story, they're not involved in the story. Right?
Yep. Yeah, no, again, this is always almost 100% a bad game. It's the same issue with them not being the protagonist. It's just like, why are we here? Why are we doing this?
And if they try and do a thing and it doesn't have any impact on the outcome of the situation, well, now you've told your players, I don't care what you do. I'm telling my story and you get to sit here and watch it. That goes back to railroading. That goes back to, just like they have no say in what's going on. That's rough. It's not something that's enjoyable.
Yeah. For your next point, again, I haven't chimed in with my other ones because it's going to tie into your last one here. But overused cliches, I would actually say these are just things that you should avoid doing because they're overused. They're not bad games by any stretch of the means. And actually, I would say, truth is, use these because if you're brand new to it, use them a lot. Use them all. Okay.
I've used every single one of the ones I wrote down, and there are so many of them. I was thinking, like, I could just write cliches for days. I could go on to TV Tropes and just like write down a billion things, and I will have used so many of them. But I think there's nothing wrong with any of the, using cliches. It's overusing cliches. And when I say overusing, I don't mean like I told a story with a hidden prince or princess, and Aaron told a story with a hidden prince or princess. But if all of my stories have a hidden prince or princess, then we got a problem.
Again, get some new ideas, Kyle. However,
seriously, Kyle,
at one point, we're going to probably do a one shot that is a plot twist everywhere. If you did a one shot that is all cliches, it's just cliches left and right, that'd also be equally fun.
That would be hilarious. It would be exhausting, but it would be very fun. And one shots are exactly the place where you can really try. Like, I think this is a terrible idea. Let's make a one shot. So that's
They're
an
low
idea.
investment games, okay? You know, your players don't like it. Great. Okay, we got to have some fun though.
Yeah, and some of these things that are like, I did not connect with that story at all, but I thought it was hilarious for a couple of hours. That's different than I'm going to tell as, you know, months long campaign, and I hated every minute of it.
You have a lot more leeway in a one shot to make a lot of the bad game mistakes. Okay, because it's so much easier to just be like, well, it's just a one shot. Like,
so quick, what cliches have you used?
like the moral enemy cliche.
Yes,
You know, yes.
childhood friend becomes a mortal enemy, or like
Some old acquaintance becomes your mortal enemy. You know, of course, I've used the loner villain.
oh yeah,
I don't think I've used princess like the secret princess or prince one ever. I've used the you know the cliches that revolve around MacGuffins and stuff like that. So like you know,
yeah.
But again, those are things that don't work. They don't work for certain reasons. That it's not just because they're the cliche that it doesn't work. They're just bad ideas that end up fitting. They could be you could have bad ideas that show up in a good game, and they can ruin a good game.
Well, and you can have bad ideas, bad cliches like this in a good game, but if they're introduced well, they can be fun. That's the whole you know, the Mary Sue. The Mary Sue is one of those cliches where a person who's never done a thing before is instantly proficient in every aspect of the thing that's supposed to take everybody else so much, because why not? Right? But if you give that to a player in a specific situation and like, okay, you're great at this particular thing now for these particular reasons, and nobody's ever done it before, and you are the master of that thing, that can be really fun for your player. And as long as you give everybody something to work with, so you're not overpowering one guy, you can have a lot of fun with that. The hidden prince or princess was something that I've used in games before. It's fun, but you can't use it all the time. That's the problem with cliches, is that if they're there all the time, your players are now looking for them. That's the same thing with plot twists. If they're there all the time, your players are looking for them rather than enjoying the story.
Exactly. And then your final one, I've got one more on top of this, but which lines up with exactly one of the things I had on my board, which was any story that's where the players cannot win, basically. Yeah. And so I wrote down a story where you are trying to undermine the player at any turn.
Okay? Oh yeah.
It's the same thing. The players cannot win. I am going to intentionally throw not just roadblocks, but just like hard stops in front of you, to the point where you have no other way to go or you are dead.
Well, this came about, we were talking last night. I was talking with my players, and we were talking about the Waterdeep game, and they had played through the whole of the campaign, all of the extra content that I threw in there, had a great time all the way up into the final mission. And in the final mission, they're only like level 3 or 4. They're low level, and they are supposed to go into one of the 4 big bads, depending on the season. It's a thing. Their hideout, and they're supposed to steal back the money or harass the person in a certain way. But under no circumstance are they supposed to engage or try and fight the big bad, because the big bad's like a level 15 and is just going to smoke them. But every obstacle you've thrown in their way for the past couple of months at this point, they've been able to defeat or fight their way through or figure out a solution to. And now you're throwing but that's not the case in this final scenario. You're supposed to do something different. It's if your players can't win in the way that you've taught them, this is how you win, you've failed that part of the story. If you show that they can beat monsters and then give them a monster they can't beat as their, that's mean. It draws them out and it makes the end of the game not fun. If they've been able to survive up to that point and now they can't because you want to have the grim, dark, everybody dies ending, that's just ugh. That's one of those plot twists that comes out of nowhere that people don't like. If you want to have a no hope ending, you need to lay out the groundwork first. You need to make sure they understand they're going in and still give them that heroic last stand sort of thing where they do something with their sacrifice rather than just, jump into a meat grinder.
Precisely. Yes. You got to give them most of these I would just strongly avoid, but again, if you are going to do something where you can't win at the end or it's clear you can't win at the end, you need to make it clear throughout the game that you cannot win.
Yeah.
My final one.
Your final one.
You can chime in on this if you want. Anything where you have a PvP based story. Okay?
Yeah.
This is a mortal sin. Okay? A conflict between your players, that's okay. That's dynamic. That's cool. Actively having them engage in battle royale, bad. Okay.
Yeah. So the game that we're playing right now on Tuesday is Paranoia, and it was designed to be conflict between players and supposed to be pitting players against each other. And the GM is supposed to be against us as well. It's a whole dynamic. You're rolling a specific dice, and if it hits one thing, it's automatically bad for you from the GM, no matter how well you rolled the rest of it. It's fine as a concept. I don't think this works as a long-term game. A couple of weeks, fine. One shot's perfect. But there's been conflict between the players because we're supposed to be in conflict. We are given different objectives and different things that we want to get done that are in direct opposition of each other. And sometimes the only way to get through that is to fight. And every time we get to that point, there is one round of combat. We decide we don't want to keep fighting, and then we go back to working together, much to the chagrin of the story.
There you go. Again, you're gonna have much better games if your players are working towards a goal together instead of their goal is to kill each other.
Yeah. It's, as a concept, it sounds fun and interesting. In practice, it is exhausting and terrible and makes your players not like it.
So I think we've given you the thoughts on bad story ideas here. And again, if you want to go back and listen to the last 200 plus episodes, it'll tell you all the ways to make good stories and how to do all that. So you probably should do it. Give it a listen. Level Up Your Gaming Podcast at gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming to let us know your thoughts on this episode. The podcast is on YouTube, so you can watch all 200 episodes there. Or you can go to your favorite podcast provider and download the podcast and give it a 5-star review, subscribe to the podcast, recommend it to a friend, all those good things. And that's going to wrap us up for the week. So for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a good week, everyone.
Okay.